Hello everyone, Dr. Evil here. I thought why not make a little video representation of my newest map this time instead of just posting a huge text wall on the CNCNet forum. So let's do this instead. Alright, so I've been working on a sequel to the Super Deluxe Arena for the past 1.5 months, and now after 150 hours of work, I guess it's ready to show. To start this video, first of all, let me explain to you what even is Super Deluxe Arena. Super Deluxe Arena is a map that I've made somewhere in mid-2021. This map offers a different style of gameplay for your revenge player to enjoy. In this map you're fighting in an arena style map against 3 other players, or in a 2 vs 2, depending on which you prefer. Your main objective is to destroy the other players' fortresses while defending your own. But, you may ask, how do you get a sufficient army to shatter through the enemy hordes and defenses? Well, this is where things get special. Super Deluxe Arena 1 featured a unique way of gaining units. By moving chaos drones around a specifically designed selection grid on the map. If you've moved your drones to one of these particular squares, you spawn units in your base for as long as you've parked your drone on it. Move it to GIs and you'll get 5 GIs per spawn. If you move it somewhere else, for example to leisure tanks, you get 3 leisure tanks per spawn, and so on. For every 10 in-game seconds, or roughly 2.5 real-life seconds, you'll get 1 spawn of unit. There's almost the entire arsenal of vanilla Yuri's Revenge available to be selected for spawning. Depending on the type of unit you'll spawn, a different number of units will spawn. This ensures a sufficient balancing. Over time, better and stronger units unlock, which gives you more and more options to fight against your foes. Since a large portion of the arsenal is available, you could use your entire knowledge of the game to be the last man standing. You can even spawn base defenses, super weapons or other useful bonuses with a similar system. I've called this the bonus drone system. If you've moved the bonus drone to, for example, Tesla and Prism Towers, you'd get a nice boost of defensive capabilities in your base. There are even bonuses to get a second or even a third spawning drone later on, which greatly enhanced your offensive capabilities. In summary, there are a lot of things to discover on Super Deluxe Arena 1. So, what would a worthy sequel look like? What improvements does it have over the first one? Well, let's begin with Super Deluxe Arena 1 featured a recursive rectangular design. The center consisted of the actual arena with 4 squared bases reserved for 4 players. The face in the center is where most battles would happen. Around the center were player-controlled gap generators and a couple of base defenses. Attacking or defending them allowed for some more interesting early game to happen. The arena was surrounded by water puddles, which allowed for some nice naval combat, as well as the option to capture a few tech shops for an advantage in combat. The corners contained the spawn selection grids and were completely unreachable by players, not even by Air Force. The grid was also protected with various anti-cheat mechanisms, especially considering the usage of psychic dominators. That's all about the first map. So what about Super Deluxe Arena 2? Well, here's what it looks like. Now this one features a recursive octagonal design, which provides a lot of improvements when compared to the first one. One of my design ideas for the second map was to implement naval combat, but in a much larger scale. In version 4 of Super Deluxe Arena 1 I've implemented 3 new naval units to be spawnable. This meant I had to change the map layout slightly, so naval units could actually be used everywhere on the map. However, due to the massive amount of weapons that were used for the base buildings, I couldn't change much of it without a larger layout redesign. The easiest solution were pulley-made passages behind the bases, so instead, the new octagonal design makes each stripe of water equally large. Now large fleets could easily move from point A to point B. In addition to this, a large portion of the arena itself now features water passages and water zones, so we are able to attack from all directions. In addition, the overall map size is much smaller than the first one. Deluxe Arena 1 had a map size of 130 to 130 cells. Deluxe Arena 2 on the other hand is just 100 times 100 cells large. Shrinking the map allows for some much better protection of your bases. In addition, it also helped me shrink the overall file size of the map, as there were almost 2000 triggers and variables used in the map. Next to 400 dummy units, various scripts, 80 task forces and around 400 different types of teams. Even without a map preview, the file already featured a 1.1 megabyte file size. And CNCnet has a pretty small upload limit, so I wanted to play it safe. Another fun change compared to the first map are multiple ways to attack other bases. The most obvious way is going to the middle and invading to any direction you want. This time, however, you can also attack your adjacent players over bridges. Keep in mind though that you're only capable of repairing the bridge to your left side. Also, unlike the first map, there are no barriers on the land edges this time, so attacking with amphibious units such as transports or robo-tanks is also a fantastic option. The most noticeable change, however, are the corners. There are no spawn selection grids whatsoever, just pure darkness, almost like depression levels of Generation Z. So where do we move the Chaos Drones this time? Spoiler alert, you don't need Chaos Drones this time. One thing I've noticed after hundreds of playtests for the first Deluxe Arena is that new players had a hard time understanding how the system worked. To help new players out, I've implemented an intro that explained how it worked in detail as shown here in the video. Though, even with this annoyingly long intro that locks you out from playing for half a minute, still players didn't understand how the map worked, at least sometimes they did. So my main mission when designing Deluxe Arena II was to implement a much more intuitive system. One that's not only easier to use, but also easier to understand. So, where do you start with that? What system could work better than the first one? Well, when playing online, I've stumbled across a pretty crazy map called the Giga Mod, made by a fellow map maker called McPony. This map heavily uses the sidebar to spawn units or fire certain triggers. One click and then something particular happens. This system seemed to be the most suitable, so I reverse engineered his map, designed my own spawning system, and after over 1 month of work, ported the old spawn select system to the new design. And now, let me show you how it works. The best thing about the new system? It doesn't require an annoying intro anymore. You can play the map right from the beginning. For new players, there will be text pop-ups that explain how the system works in the beginning, but aside from that, you can play on the first frame the game starts. The spawn selection is now completely done over the sidebar. Select whatever unit you want in your base once, and it is done. No more drone driving, no more checking where you have to move your drone. All is done just with a simple mouse click. And if you want something else, just click it. Your previous section will get disabled and your new selection will enable. However, keep in mind that you can only spawn either an infantry unit or a vehicle or a ship or an aircraft. Also, unlike Deluxe Arena 1, there is no option to spawn multiple units at once. Instead, it utilizes a different super bonus. Speaking of bonuses. In Deluxe Arena 1, the selection grid was split into 2 sections. One for units and one for base defenses, super weapons or other useful bonus structures, as well as the so-called extra drones. Since there is no such selection grid in Deluxe Arena 2, the bonus spawn system is now also done via the sidebar. When you start up the game, it takes 10 minutes until you can select a bonus. You can spawn various base defenses over the defense tab, or you could switch to the buildings tab and gain other useful bonuses for your game. For example, the service depot gives auto repair to all of your vehicles, the barracks grant auto heal to all of your infantry. Instead of the hospital, I've used the image of the Soviet barracks this time, as its footprint is much smaller. If you click on the spy plane icon, you'll get a Soviet radar and URIS psychic sensor. Those give you a spy set, a minimap radar, 2 scouting options to counter gap generators, as well as a large psychic sensor radius for both radars, so you can see movement of cloaked or shrouded units. Bioreactors are necessary in case your original power plants get destroyed. If both of them get destroyed, you'll lose vision and your base is powered down, rendering all power-based defenses useless. Your backup reactors will spawn in an easier to defend spot as well. In this menu you can also select all super weapons like iron curtains or a weather control device or a genetic mutator, whatever you wish. If any building gets destroyed, you can always respawn the same way you got them. In addition to this, there are the so-called super bonuses. Those give you a huge advantage over other players as they are not placed as buildings and thus cannot be cancelled by any means. The spy icons give you initial veterancy for either infantry or vehicles, or both if you buy them both, but by far the strongest bonuses are the plus 50% and the plus 100% spawn bonus. Those will increase the rate at which all of your units will spawn. Normally every unit spawn repeatedly every 12 in-game seconds, or roughly 3 seconds in real life. With the plus 50% bonus you reduce the spawn time to 9 in-game seconds, or roughly 2 real-life seconds, with the plus 100% bonus to just 6. This system replaces the extra drone system used in the first map. One new addition I've implemented for the second map is a timer every time you use a bonus, so now you can actually see when you can select something new. As a small homage to the first Deluxe Arena, there even is a timer icon in the sidebar using the Chaos Drone as its cameo. Every bonus you select has a different respawn timer. The more powerful a bonus is, the longer it takes for you to select a new one. Here's a list of the corresponding respawn timers in case you want to know. Alright, those were the biggest changes to the Deluxe Arena gameplay experience. Now, let's talk about some smaller changes as well. Deluxe Arena 1 had a pretty interesting bug with the desolators. In the map's code I've tinkered around with the desolator and some of its lighting. That will also include its weapon whenever it's fired. I've wanted the impact of the desolator weapon to be green, and there is an option to achieve that, so I did it. However, it had a pretty interesting side effect. Adding this particular line alone also affected the versus of the weapon's warhead. In case you don't know, versus are a group of percentages that affect how much damage you do against certain types of armor. It's the reason why, for example, Rhino tanks deal good damage against buildings and other vehicles but not infantry, or snipers can easily kill infantry but not vehicles, and so on. Adding the combat light disable flags, however, also affected the desolator's versus for some odd reason. Normally the versus should look like this. No damage against buildings and little damage against vehicles. However, adding the flags overrode the versus to deal 100% of damage against everything. Given that the desolator weapon deals 125 damage against its targets, this would mean they deal an insane amount of damage against every target. For example, they could destroy Tesla coils with just a few shots. What the fuck, Westwood Studios. So for Deluxe Arena 2 I've removed the combat lighting flags again, and now the bug has been fixed. The second biggest bug in Deluxe Arena 1 was that you were required to place AI players on unused spots. So for example, if you wanted to play with just 3 players, you had to place a 4th AI player or else the map would crash. I've reduced the annoyance for this problem by simply let the map detect if a player was an AI. And after a while the player would automatically self-destruct. The reason this bug happened was due to the map spawning in units in the beginning, for players that don't exist. At the start of the game each player would get a small amount of starting units and their original selection roads. However, due to the way the engine worked, the game will crash if the map tries to spawn a team type for a player that never existed in the first place. To get rid of this bug I've simply removed all of the mentioned spawns. Actually, fixing this bug was necessary, as now you can't even play the map with AI at all. The reason for this is another known engine bug called the 100 unit bug. The 100 unit bug is caused by adding more than 100 custom infantry or vehicle units in the map's code. Doing this causes the AI to break in very weird ways. It's also the reason why AI behaves weirdly on my Red Alert 2 0 hour mod. The number seems to be pretty arbitrary, so again, what the fuck, Westwood Studios? For Deluxe Arena 2, however, I had to add this many custom units to make the new spawning system even possible. I'm going way over the 100 unit limit for both lists. I'm going so far above that the AI breaks entirely and causes the map to crash whenever loading it. So do yourself a favor and don't add AI this time. Deluxe Arena 2 also features various edits and some custom units I want to show to you. First of all, the map now forces the rebalance patch to be enabled. This was done as the rebalance patch improves some of the lesser used units by a lot. And forcing the map to enable it reduces the amount of code I had to add, hence the map file got much smaller. The hit points for masterminds got reduced from 500 to 400, as those were an extremely viable option to get rid of many units at once, even with a small spawn count of just one unit each. Unlike the first map, the second map now fully implements Chrono Legionnaires and the Chronosphere, both of which couldn't be used in Deluxe Arena 1 due to the way the spawn selection system worked. Now with this gone, I don't have to fear players trying to cheat it anymore. Checkmate, cheaters. To make certain units more usable, there are some unusual edits done by me. For example, terrorists fly now instead of walking to their destination. This allows for clearing blobs of infantry, especially in the early game. Evans and allied amphibious transports are stuffed, allowing the players to launch sneak attacks all over the map. To balance this out, certain units have gained stealth detection. Yuri's amphibious transports, on the other hand, are now hovering battle fortresses with a Gatling weapon. Speaking of Yuri, Psychic commandos have larger range and can also fire out of transports, although with a smaller range, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of smaller changes done to the map, so you can read them all in the CNCnet forum in the representing thread for Deluxe Arena 2 if you wish. Alright, enough babbling for now. And now,